Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of how to create a custom level in Sonic Adventure 2. Today we're going to be talking about how to add custom splines into our level, which basically means how to add things such as loops, grind rails, and even animations for enemies, such as making a flying beetle go around in a circle. And so to do that, you'll notice, for here, I've just kind of hopped into this basic play level that I've made. I put it together with a few planes and a few cubes here and there. Nothing too special, but I did add some textures to make it look nice for the tutorial. But just to get started and to jump right in here, once you've got a level that you want to work with, and you want to start adding in a loop or a rail, simply go into object mode, go into add, and you're going to want to add curve bezier. And what this will do is it'll add a bezier curve that we can now play around with in our Blender scene. But you'll notice here, by adding it, I can't really see much. Like, even if I zoom in by a lot, you might not see that something is there. So something that I'm going to do that really makes dealing with curves a lot simpler is I'm actually going to lock on to an axis here. In particular, I'm going to go to this top right ball over here, and I'm going to hit the Z axis. And what this is going to do is it's going to lock down my view so I can only see from top to bottom. And this will make dealing with our curves a lot simpler. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to pan over by hitting shift and then holding shift and then pressing the mouse wheel. And you'll notice if I zoom in here, I can actually see my curve. And, it's pretty small. And if we go into edit mode, you'll see that, it only has 2 points. But as you'll see later, 2 points is all we need to get started. So before we start making an example curve to play around with, let me just show you the basics of how these curves work. By grabbing a point and hitting G, we can move some of these points around. So just like how you would move anything around in Blender. So I can hit G, move this around as much as I want. I can also grab one of these handles over here. And by hitting G, I can move those around. And what these handles do is they kind of control how our curve looks. And in particular, every point has 2 handles. One that influences the left side and one that influences the right side. So you'll notice if I push the right side out, the left side doesn't change that much, but if I do move it up and down, the left side will change. So that's how we move points around. Once I put a point where I like it, and I change the handles and I do whatever I want, if I hit E on my keyboard, you'll notice here that is what creates a new point. So I can create a new point, move it around, change these handles around. If I hit E again, I'll make a new point. If I keep hitting E, we get lots of new points. So those are the basics about how curves work in Blender. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make an example, and it's going to be in particular a rail. And I'm going to put a rail in my level, and I'm going to show you how we do fancy things and make it go vertical, make it go left and right, and spin it around. So you see this platform right here. What I'm thinking, I'm going to put a rail right here, and I'm just going to spin it around a little bit. I'm going to spin it around this platform in kind of like a spiral, and it's going to look pretty cool, I think. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to grab all the points, still in edit mode, and I'm going to hit G on my keyboard to move this around. Of course, you can select all the points by hitting A on your keyboard, but you can also use the mouse wheel. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab one of these points, and I'm going to put it right up there. And you're probably wondering, all right, if I want a spiral and I want this to be circular, well, why is this a line? Well, that's where the handles come in. If I push this out, we can make this curvier. So I'm just going to push this out. And my goal here is, once I find a good spot, I'm going to add another point. And I want to make this whole line as continuous as possible. Basically, I want to avoid sharp turns at corners, stuff that looks like that. Because if I have something that looks like that, 1, it's not going to work very well in the game. But 2, the smoother I can get to this being a continuous line, the smoother it's going to be in-game and the better it's going to look. So I'm just going to get this as smooth and as circular as I can. You might have to move some of these old points, to get things just right. But again, it's your own level. You can choose how smooth you want to make things, and how much time you want to spend towards fixing things up and making it look good. I think that looks fine for now. This is just a tutorial, so I'm just gonna try to make things look decent, but I'm not gonna spend too much time perfecting if I don't need to. So that looks like all right. It's not perfect, but it's all right. I'll put another point right there. Make sure that's kind of, circular. And I think I'm going to stick with that for now. And so you'll notice here, I have got a circle here. It's not the best circle, nor is it the most perfect, but by locking onto the z-axis and playing around with my curve, I was able to create just a general structure of how this is going to work and how my rail is going to be laid out. So that's pretty good, but you're probably wondering, okay, how do I start making this go up and start doing fancier things? Well, believe it or not, it is very easy. All we're going to do is the same thing we just did, but on another axis. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lock onto this negative x axis here. Negative x or x, both of them work. And I'm just going to select one of these points one at a time and move them up slowly. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to lock onto the x. If some of these points are kind of hard to select, what you can do, you can just move the camera, select the point, then lock back on. So once I do that, I'm just going to grab one of these points, start moving it up, grab another one of these points, start moving it up. And, it's important to note when you're doing things with rails, you want to make sure things are smooth. So I don't want to put a point all the way up there, but I want to make this, as smooth as I can. So I'm going to move that one up, and I'm going to move this one up. And so you'll notice, all right, now we finally added some verticality to our rail. But you may notice, okay, this is not like the smoothest looking thing in the world. Like we got lots of bumps here and there. How do we fix that? Well, just like how we fixed it while we're locked on the z-axis, we can fix it while we're locked on other axes. And the reason why is because these handles are actually three-dimensional. So what I can do, I'm going to grab onto one of these rails here, and I'm going to transform this straight line into a curve just by pushing this handle down a little bit. And you'll notice by doing that, this whole curve right here, at least this part right here, turns a lot smoother. And again, the smoother our curve is, and the less corners there are, the better. So you'll notice there's another corner right here, another sharp corner there. So if I can fix that, that would be great. So to do that, you can change the right-hand side of this handle. But you'll notice if I have a point like this where the handle, one of the handles comes out a lot, I may not want to change this one specifically because just by changing this right handle a little bit, you'll notice I have a little too much influence on that. So I'm just going to change this handle over here. I'm just going to push this one down just a little bit. And you'll notice by doing that, I kind of make it a little smoother. Of course, it's not perfect, and you may want to adjust this. But it's looking a lot better than what it did before. It's looking a lot better. So far we've done the z-axis, we've done the x-axis. For most people, that's enough. If you want to, you can also smooth out the y-axis. So I'm just going to show you how I would do that. I'm just going to push some of these down. I want to avoid the hard corners. So you'll notice here we have another hard corner. So I'm just going to zoom in, make sure I get this handle over here. And then, zoomed out a little too much. Push this down a little bit so it's nice and smooth. And again, it's up to you how smooth you want to make your curves, but, I think it's pretty satisfying kind of tuning this stuff, so I find it pretty fun. So there we go. We have a little basic thing going on here. Now, something you may want to change is, when you're tuning your things in different axes, sometimes it will affect the axes you've already tuned. So you'll see here my z-axis. It kind of got moved a little bit. Now it's kind of clipping into the platform a little bit. So I'm just going to push that out a little bit. The x-axis is looking fine. Y-axis is looking fine. Z-axis, there's no crinkles or anything. This is looking pretty good. So once you stumble upon a curve that you think is good, that you're satisfied with, now we can begin preparing this so that it can be exported and then imported into Sonic Adventure 2 in a format that works. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the right-hand side of Blender over here, and I'm going to open up this green menu. This in particular is the curve menu, and it has a lot of settings related specifically to curves. And while you're in this curve menu, the green menu, you're going to want to find this geometry tab. And inside this geometry tab, you're going to want to look at this extrude setting. What this extrude setting will do is it'll turn our black line into kind of like a strip of paper, you'll see. And you'll see why we do that in a little bit. But right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set this to a small number. I'm going to go with 5. I tend to find 5 is a pretty good number, but if you find making it smaller or bigger makes it easier, then power to you. Feel free to play around with it to see what you like more. But once we do that, we have this strip of paper. What we want to do now is go into object mode And then we want to convert this into a mesh. So we're going to right click anywhere, hit this convert to menu, and convert to mesh. And now you'll see when we do that, a few things change here and there, but most notably, that green menu before has turned from the curve menu to this vertex menu, which is going to be important to remember for later. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back into edit mode, and you'll see now our strip of paper has all these slices in the middle. If you see your strip of paper has all these slices, that means you're doing good. So far, everything looks great. If your strip of paper does not look like this, go back to the tutorial, try to repeat some of these steps. So far, everything is good. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all the points by hitting A on my keyboard. And with edit mode still open, what I want to do is I want to make one single cut through the middle of this entire paper. So there's this really nice tool that you can use. It's called the loop cut. So you can hit it while you're in the edit menu, or I believe you can hit, there should be a shortcut. It might be B, or I guess here it's saying Control R. And so once you hit that, you'll notice here, even if you just hover over the center, it'll automatically recommend the center as like the best line to cut. So, it's hard to get this part wrong. I'm going to click it now. And once I click it, you'll see there's this very clean line the middle of our strip of paper. Kind of looks almost exactly like that first path that we made, the black line. So once we've done that, everything is great. Our next step that we want to do is go over the right-hand side of Blender into that green vertex menu. And you're going to want to open this vertex group tab and hit the plus sign. This will create a brand new vertex group. And specifically, it'll give Blender enough information to tell it how to create our Sonic Adventure 2 path. And once you've created a vertex group, you're going to want to hit this assign button. And this will assign all those center paths to one vertex group. Once you've done that, we can actually create our path. But we're not going to export it yet. We're just going to create it to see what it looks like so far. So I'm going to hit N on my keyboard to open up the SA Tools tab. And here, what you want to do is you want to look for the Curve Info tab. This is where we're going to be able to create our paths and also export our paths. So with the paper strip, all set up with the way that we did it and in object mode, I'm going to hit Generate Path, and you'll see Create Unique Collection is selected here. You can leave that one selected, that's fine. And I'm going to hit OK. And you'll notice when I do that, we get this black line with a whole bunch of arrows sticking out. And you may be wondering, okay, what do the arrows mean? Well, if you remember in how Sonic Adventure 2 rails and loops work, you'll know that, rails in particular can be pretty complicated. They can spin, they can rotate, they can do a whole bunch of things. And so the game needs to keep track of exactly what is up at all times. Or at least, which way Sonic should be pointing up in any given point. So you'll notice here in the beginning of our little rail here, we actually have these arrows pointing to the side or pointing diagonal. And that's actually not good, because what that means is as soon as Sonic gets on that rail, instead of his head pointing directly to the sky, Sonic is going to be at a 90-degree angle. And if he's right on the rail, that means he's probably slow enough to fall and he'll just fall off the rail. So we are going to want to change this so that the arrows are pointing up so that he can get on the rail and at least be fast enough so he could stay on that rail. So far, so good. So now in order to fix these arrows, I am going to undo the creation of our path. And I'm also going to undo the loop cut. But I'll do that in just a second. And the reason why is I just want to stop to show you how we are going to fix this arrow thing. And I want you to notice how once I go into edit mode and I choose vertex select, you'll see that all along our points, all along this line in the center, we have these points. And we have 2 points, one on top and one on the bottom that we have. Well, if you remember when we were first dealing with the paths, we had those handles that controlled how curvy our path was. Well, now you can think of these points as kind of like the handles for our middle line right here. And this will control which point the up arrows will point in. So what I want to eventually do is I'm going to rotate some of those points so that when I do create my path, the arrows will be pointing up or, at least pointing in a direction that I want it to. So now I'm going to undo this loop cut, and we should have just the basic strips. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take these points, and I'm going to take 2 of them at a time. So I'm going to select them. I'm going to hold shift to make sure I'm selecting 2 at a time. And I'm going to, oh, this is a weird point. Why are you over here? Okay. I'm just going to select them, 1 pair at a time, and I'm going to rotate them so that they eventually go the way I want to. So right now, I'm just going to lock onto one of these axes. I think the y-axis seems best here, but if your path goes along another axis, feel free to play around. And with those 2 points selected, I'm going to hit R on my keyboard to rotate, and I'm just going to make this parallel with the ground. Doing that will make the point, the black arrow, point up, at least for this section right here. And eventually what you're going to see is I'm going to take these 2 points, I'm going to keep on doing this, and I'm eventually going to do it where I'll be able to then, make it kind of go smoothly into the curve rather than directly, perpendicular to the ground, and, you're going to fall off. I'll give Sonic at least an opportunity to pick up speed first before he does this. So I'm just going to keep selecting these points one at a time. And, if things look weird right now, don't worry about it. As soon as we start rotating some of these other points, things will look a little better. So, again, I'm just going to do this smoothly, 1 point at a time. I accidentally grabbed some of those points in the background. That's not good. So there we go. And eventually, I will bring it back to just the normal way that the curve is. So Sonic will be facing outward. But if you find that you want, your rail to be different or to be a certain way, then you can just keep on editing it using this tactic. So I'm just going to keep on adding and rotating. Okay, and that's starting to look good here. I'm going to take these 2, lock on again. Eventually, from the y-axis lock, it's starting to look, not like the best axis to lock onto, but, it's fine for right now. And you'll notice here, now our rail is a little smoother. You'll notice that, the strip of paper is kind of rotated in a way that the black arrow will point towards the sky, which is good, what we want. And eventually, it eases into that curve where Sonic will eventually be, facing left or facing right. So that's great. That is just what we want. So now I'm going to select everything, and I'm just going to repeat some of those steps we had from before. So I'm going to do a loop cut by clicking loop cut, hitting the center. I'm going to go back to the green menu, create a vertex group, hit the assign button, go into object mode, hit generate path, and OK. And you'll notice, just like how we said, those black arrows are now pointing up, and they kind of give Sonic a chance to get to speed first, and then eventually he'll be facing, a little outward, and it'll do this nice little spin, and then he'll fall off at the end. So great. That is how we make a basic path. And so now, once I'm ready to export this path, all I have to do is grab my path right here, and then I want to hit this export path data button. And when I do that, I want you to notice here, it opens a dialog, but more importantly, on the right-hand side here, there's a setting called curve code. And that's very important to note because that will control what our path gets used for. Because, in Sonic Adventure, there's lots of things our path can be used for, like loops and handrails. So this is where we tell it what exactly we want. And when I click this open, you'll notice we have a few options here. Sonic Adventure 1 and Sonic Adventure 2 loops, as well as grind rails and handrails. And you may be wondering, all right, what's the difference between a grind rail and a handrail? Well, grind rails, those are kind of like the normal rails that you see in levels. He'll jump on it, he'll ride on it, he'll have some fun. And the handrails are specifically used in Crazy Gadget. And those are the kinds where Sonic kind of hangs from it with his hand, and he flies around that way. I'm not sure if handrails work in any level other than Crazy Gadget. I mean, maybe they do, but I haven't experimented with it personally. So for this tutorial, I'm just going to make a grind rail. And I'm going to go, I already have my level mod folder open over here. So if you're unfamiliar with my level mod, please check out the other videos in this tutorial series. And over here in this GDPC folder, that's where I'm going to save my rail. Now, something to note is because we're using the My Level Mod tool to, create a level in Sonic Adventure 2. When it comes to this part, we can name our rail whatever we want. So it's nice in that we can name it whatever we want to remember it. So if this is using a staircase, I can call it staircase rail or something like that. But if you're not using my level mod, or you're using another tool or a different way of creating a level, then it's very important that you know if this needs to follow a specific name, or if you're replacing something. So feel free to go and join the X-Hacks Discord and ask there, and they'll be more than happy to help you out with this part. But for me, I'm just going to call this simple rail. I'm going to hit export path data, and it should be saved in my GTPC folder. And once we're done, now our level has a rail to work with. Now, of course, something to note here is we still have this strip of paper and we still have our path. And so what I'm going to do here is I want to tell you, just by having that path in our level, just by having, that ini file there, it isn't actually what creates, the geometry that you see when you jump on a rail. We actually have to make that ourselves. Just by having the rail there, you're just going to see like an invisible, like there's not going to be anything there. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to use this line, this path that we made to kind of create, a rail that we can see. I'm not going to texture. I'm just going to keep it simple for the sake of the tutorial. But what I'm going to do is, I believe you can also edit this strip of paper if you want. But I'm going to just grab my path here. I'm going to delete this strip of paper actually because we don't need that. I'm going to grab my path here, and I'm actually going to hit extrude here. Except this time, instead of going for 5, maybe I'll go for 1, just to keep it pretty small. I'm going to keep it 1. I wonder what taper object is. Actually, I don't know, but I don't want to find out. So I created like a small strip of paper here, and you'll notice it kind of follows the arrows. So right now Sonic, he would be riding kind of on the top. And just like before, what I'm going to do, I'm going to convert to mesh, and that'll convert it to a mesh. And we still have these arrows here, but, don't worry about the arrows too much. It's not important. I mean, eventually at the end, we're probably going to want to kill off some of those points, just so that our blender doesn't crash. But once I've done that, I'm going to go hop over to edit mode. I'm going to go click on select mode faces, and I'm going to hit A on my keyboard to select all the faces. And you'll notice if I hit right click, there should be a section here where it says, extrude faces. And now I'll be able to take my strip of paper and turn it into more of a, kind of a three-dimensional object. So now Sonic, he'll be riding on the top of this, and you'll be able to actually see it in the level. The arrows don't really matter. It's totally okay if arrows are there. So I'm just going to export this to Sonic Adventure 2 battle level. I'm going to go to my level mod, the GDPC folder, save as level.sa2 battle. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my Sonic Adventure 2 install folder. And I'm going to run the mod manager. And from here, I'm going to make sure my level mod is selected. Go into debug, make sure I'm running, City Escape. Because right now that's what I have my level mod set as. And now I'm just going to hit play. And you should see, hopefully, when I run this, our rail right there. Now, of course, I didn't texture it, so right now it's probably some default texture. But you'll notice as soon as I go on this, it'll work as expected, which is great. Now, again, the arrows are pointing up in the beginning, so you'll see Sonic is kind of facing up, which is kind of what we want. But it looks like our rail kind of goes to the side a little too fast. So you notice if I jump on like over here, he's already at the side. So maybe, if you're using this for an actual level, you may want to put, a speed, a dash panel or something, or just adjust the angle. But otherwise, I'm very satisfied with this. With the tools and tricks that we've gone over in this tutorial, I fell off. You can make any loop and any rail that you want. So that is great. If you have any other questions, feel free to write down in the comments down below, or feel free to join the X-Hacks Discord. And otherwise, I hope this tutorial was able to help you out. All right? See ya.